Listen to me, I'm gonna divorce you. Facing my adamant refusal, Jack blurted that out. Next to him, Catherine was saying, "Please take care of us soon." I thought I had been devoted to Jack and Catherine, but apparently, I was mistaken. For them, living together seemed to be the ultimate act of filial piety. I've been turning down the idea of cohabitation for about 5 years, but it seems I've reached my limit. I do as Jack says and pack my things to leave the house. A few days later, I received hundreds of calls from Jack. My name is Natalie. I'll be turning 48 this year. Jack and I have been married for about 20 years. We weren't head over heels in love even when we were dating. Jack seemed indifferent to romance, and I didn't think he was that interested in it. We have one child, but he's already moved out, so it's just Jack and I in the house. Jack has a rather dominating personality, a tad intimidating. But given my laid-back nature, I never really minded his quirks too much. We've been together since high school, and though I hesitated when Jack proposed, I eventually decided to marry him. In the early days of our marriage, I was a stay-at-home wife, taking care of the household and attending to tasks given by my in-laws. After some time, our child was born, and the enthusiastic grandparents would often visit our place. Initially, I was told that living with in-laws was off the table. I wouldn't want to live with my parents always around. It'd be stifling. We're never gonna live with them. I believed those words and decided to marry Jack. However, as our child grew older, out of the blue, Jack proposed living with his parents. Sure, our child became more independent, and in a few years, he'd be off to college. But I was against the idea of living with my in-laws, and I made it clear every time the subject came up. We had several discussions about cohabitating, and I rejected them all. Every time, Jack would become grumpy. Maybe he thought I'd eventually agree? There were mainly 2 reasons why I didn't want to live together. Firstly, I didn't get along with my mother-in-law, Catherine. Shortly after our marriage, I was often summoned to my in-laws' place. Since I wasn't working at that time, I'd always rush over if they needed any assistance. But even when I hurried, Catherine would complain, "You're late. How long do you think I've been waiting? The TV isn't working, please check it." And it wouldn't even be urgent matters. At first, it felt like minor nuisances, but over time her actions escalated. During a family gathering, everyone was served lunch except for me. They had ordered sushi for the day, and there wasn't any for me. So, I had no choice but to eat alone at a nearby diner. As Catherine's blatant acts of hostility increased, I tried discussing it with Jack once. "I think your mom has been giving me a hard time." I was hesitant to talk about it, but can you maybe speak to her? I tried to approach it gently, but Jack took it as criticism. Feeling that I had insulted his mother, he got furious and gave me the cold shoulder for a while. That made it even harder for me to confide in him. From that point on, I felt Jack's attitude towards me changed. He was never the type to help around the house, but he used to assist when I asked. However, after discussing Catherine, he started ignoring even my simplest requests. While I kept refusing the cohabitation, Jack's mood worsened even more. Not only did his demeanor change drastically, but he also began coming home late and even hinted at having an affair. Not only did Jack's attitude change drastically, but he also stopped coming home. Moreover, he even began to make comments hinting at infidelity. "I'm going out for drinks with a lady tonight, so I'll be late," Jack would say, only to return home the next afternoon. This went on for about 4 years. Even if the love is waning, no one can stand being treated like that by their spouse. I became so worn out that even my kids began to worry about me. My friends also started telling me, "You look thin. I mean, more worn out. You should eat properly and get some rest." Although I knew I needed to do something, I couldn't bring myself to act. That's when a friend approached me with a job offer at her flower shop. One of my friends owned the shop and had a vacancy. She thought it might help lift my spirits. When I told Jack and Catherine about my new job, they casually remarked, "It's good you're working. We need to support ourselves." That's true. We could live on Jack's salary, but I'd feel better knowing Natalie has an income, Catherine chimed in. Of course, I planned to contribute to household expenses since I lived with Jack. But that doesn't mean I'm doing it for Jack or Catherine. Working at the flower shop lightened my mood, and people began to say I looked happier. When I was a stay-at-home mom, I felt down dealing with Jack and Catherine all the time. However, interacting with various people at the shop made me realize how much I enjoyed working. This newfound happiness made me less inclined to go home. I'd often lie to Jack about working late, just to avoid seeing him, or go out to dinner with friends. This went on for about a year. About 5 years after we started discussing living together, Jack called me for a talk. He began pointing out that I had been spending a lot of time outside. My spending habits had become reckless since I started working, and I wasn't doing household chores anymore. Then, he stated that someone as lazy as me was not needed in the house. To add insult to injury, he said he would forgive everything if I agreed to move in with him. I firmly refused as usual. But just then, Catherine, probably waiting in the next room, burst in. "Why are you so against moving in? Did I do something wrong?" she smirked. Jack defended her, saying Catherine hadn't done anything and that it was just my bad attitude. I reiterated my decision not to move in with them, but it seemed they didn't get the message. Jack threatened, "You better start listening, or I'm gonna file for divorce." Catherine jumped in, "Please take care of us soon." Though I had endured so much, that day was the last straw. While I kept things calm at the moment, the next day, I decided to pack my things and leave the house. I waited until I was sure Jack was at work to make my move. I couldn't take everything, so I packed only the essentials. Contemplating where to go, I realized my only option was to turn to my parents. When I called them, they were happy to come pick me up. Honestly, I thought my mom would be angry, since she'd previously urged me to get married. However, after explaining the situation, she told me to come back. A few hours after the call, my parents arrived in a large van. Apparently, they had rented a big vehicle just for this. Feeling loved, I decided to move all my belongings out. That night, I received a call from Jack, who probably had finished work. "Hey, I noticed your stuff is gone from the house. You're not actually thinking of getting a divorce, are you?" he said. I let him know that's exactly what I was planning. I pointed out that the business card of a divorce attorney was on the table and told him from now on to communicate through the lawyer. Jack was livid. "Where are you now? Come back. I'll teach you a lesson," he started shouting threats. I've never experienced physical violence from Jack before, but this time, it might be best not to talk to him directly. Caught off guard by the mention of a lawyer, Jack hesitated for a moment but soon started throwing insults again. I could hear Catherine in the background, yelling, "Forget about her. I'll find someone even better for you. If you get divorced now, you can choose from a bunch of girls." Catherine probably doesn't know what's gonna happen to Jack next. However, if she agrees to a divorce in any form, it's convenient for me. Jack started listening to Catherine's words, and seemed to be leaning towards the idea of a divorce. And then, he said, "You sure you want to divorce me? You ain't gonna find another good man like me anytime soon," and hung up the phone. After that, there was no contact from Jack or Catherine, and I enjoyed a moment of peace at my parents' house. The flower shop where I work is managed by a friend, and thanks to their consideration, I was allowed to take some time off. At my parents' house, I enjoyed my mom's home-cooked meals and had a drink in the evening with my dad, forgetting the bad stuff. However, I guess Jack got a call from the lawyer because he started calling me angrily again. I told him to communicate through the lawyer, but did he not listen? The reason why Jack kept contacting me was clear. I had gathered evidence that would be beneficial for me during the divorce. For a long time, Jack often hinted at cheating. I was initially shocked, but I had a feeling we might divorce someday, so I recorded conversations just in case. He wasn't actually cheating, but it was true he went out for dinner with another woman. This was confirmed by a local private investigator. With this information alone, it wasn't enough to claim he cheated, but because I had his recorded statements, I could present it as evidence of his affair. Jack was furious about this and kept calling me. I didn't need to be in touch with Jack anymore, but I couldn't help but wonder how he'd react, so I answered the phone. The first thing he blurted out was, "What the heck is this? I haven't cheated on you. Where's the evidence, huh? Is this some kind of fabrication? Cut the crap. Do you enjoy tarnishing my reputation? And you want to claim compensation for the emotional stress I've supposedly caused you? If anything, I should be the one asking." He was shouting at the top of his lungs. He was so loud that his voice distorted and I couldn't hear some parts. Given how aggressive Jack was, I expected he'd be reluctant about the divorce. But a few days later, for some reason, he easily agreed to it. The reason being, Catherine ended up covering the compensation fee. I was surprised that Catherine had that kind of money, but if it meant he'd agree to the divorce, it wasn't an issue. I decided to accept the offer from Jack's side. After consulting with my attorney, we ended up slightly reducing the compensation amount. But it can't be helped. It's common to ask for a bit more initially and then reduce the amount later, to make it easier for the other party to accept. Just when I thought I could finally get the compensation and get divorced, it seems it won't be that easy. Just when the divorce seemed to be finalized, Jack decided to return to his in-laws' place. But when he got there, he found Catherine and her father, Kenneth, fighting. The reason was Catherine's affair. Jack, who happened to be there, got an earful from Kenneth as well. "Are you two kidding me? Even though you have your life partners, you let your hearts be stolen by someone else. I've been patient till now, but I can't take it anymore. Both of you, get out." "No. I haven't cheated on anyone. If you say I have, show me the evidence." Catherine was defiant against Kenneth, but she was speechless when Kenneth showed her the photos. The photos showed Catherine arm in arm with her lover. Catherine had no words when presented with the undeniable evidence. On the other hand, Jack said, "I didn't cheat. This is something Natalie did on her own. The evidence shown is fake. It's a frame-up. There's no need to kick me out too." But Kenneth wasn't hearing any of it. Their argument was so loud, the entire neighborhood could hear it. Or so I heard later from a friend who lived nearby. They say like father, like son, but this seemed too much. Just like me, Kenneth had gathered evidence of Catherine's infidelity. Unlike Jack, Catherine really did cheat. She had been cheating for about 5 years, and Kenneth had noticed a while ago. Once he realized, he hired a private investigator and gathered evidence of her infidelity. Not only did Kenneth have photos of Catherine cheating, but he also had emails with content suggesting an affair. Catherine wasn't good with smartphones and hadn't set a password, so it was possible to gather the emails as evidence. Later, given our similar situations, I had a chance to talk with Kenneth. That's when he showed me the photos he used as evidence. The photos I received from the private investigator were pretty clear and showed evidence of cheating. Just having their arms around each other isn't enough proof, but the content of the texts clearly showed infidelity. From my own experience, I understood how important evidence really is. My lawyer even said, having evidence puts you in a significantly better position. In Natalie's case, there are recordings, so even if there wasn't actual cheating, it proves that the marital relationship has severely broken down. You can definitely get a divorce. The difference between me and Kenneth was whether we were considering divorce. By the time I had gathered enough evidence, I was already prepared for the possibility of divorce. However, even after Kenneth found proof of infidelity, he continued with his married life. He said he continued the marriage because of the deep bond formed over the years they spent together. After the divorce, when Kenneth told me this, it reminded me of how I felt. When you spend years with someone, there's a point where you realize you're together more out of habit than love. If both parties communicate well during these times, it's probably not an issue. In reality, couples who've been together for years, or married couples who've been together for decades, communicate well. Kenneth and I just chose the wrong partners and couldn't manage that. Jack had a hard time with Shuji and Catherine, but in the end, the two were thrown out of their home. Having nowhere to go, they reluctantly ended up in a monthly apartment. It seems like Jack and Catherine were quite alike, often spending recklessly at convenience stores and buying unnecessary branded items. That's why they had hardly any savings when they were evicted. The reason I knew about their lack of savings is because they begged me to lend them money for the monthly apartment's rent. I had already divorced Jack and hadn't received any alimony from him, so I didn't lend him any money. So, if they could afford a monthly apartment, they must have borrowed money from relatives or acquaintances. However, monthly apartments have month-to-month contracts, so they'll have to leave after a month. Right now, people are keeping their distance from Jack. The reason is that I told everyone about what Jack did. Jack and I had been dating since our college days, so we had many mutual friends. Coincidentally, soon after our divorce, I was invited to a reunion. At the reunion, there were updates on everyone's lives, and I was asked about what I was doing now and how things were with Jack. I didn't think lying was right, and I had nothing to hide, so I honestly reported everything Jack and Catherine had done. Some classmates had lent money to Jack and were angry about the way he approached them. That guy always has an excuse for not paying back. I lent him $1,000 thinking of our old friendship. Guess I'll have to write that off. But I never imagined he'd do something so terrible to Natalie. I wish she had confided in us, one said, while also taking my side. Since then, my interaction with friends increased, and Jack lost his. Having no one left to borrow from, Jack began visiting supermarkets late at night, looking for half-priced ready-made meals. The reason I know this is because I ran into him at a supermarket just before closing. Jack kept walking back and forth in the deli section, waiting for the half-price stickers to be applied. Finally, when they did put half-price stickers on the meals, Jack headed to the cashier. But it seemed he didn't have enough money, even with the discount. "Can't you just discount it by a few cents? It's no big deal. If the cashier can't be flexible, I'm gonna complain," he shouted and stormed out of the store. I didn't want to bump into him, so I waited for a while before leaving. But even after 30 minutes, Jack was still outside the supermarket. There was someone there arguing with him. "Why couldn't you buy it? It's strange. I'm starving, and I haven't eaten anything today. Do something and get some food." The person arguing with Jack was Catherine. From their conversation, it seemed they were struggling even to eat that day. Trying not to be noticed, I pulled my hat down further and left the supermarket. After finalizing my divorce with Jack, I decided to re-enter the workforce. I was really surprised when I found a company willing to hire me on a contract basis at my age. I made up my mind to work hard to give back to this company. I had always thought I wasn't cut out for work, but as I tackled challenges head-on, I began to receive positive feedback. Most of my managers in the department are younger than me, but thanks to their thorough training, I can see my skills growing. Initially, I was just a contractor, but recently they approached me about becoming a full-time employee. With a full-time position, there'll be more opportunities and challenges. And naturally, I'll earn more money. I've been saving up since my single days, enough to afford a house. Now that I've divorced Jack, I don't plan on remarrying. So, I decided to buy a condo when I got the promotion. In the past, I bumped into Jack and Catherine at a local Walmart, so part of my reason for moving was to avoid running into them. If we live in the same area, we might bump into each other again. As of now, Jack hasn't tried to reconcile or asked for money, but you never know. Friends and family advised me to move as far away as possible. The new place is a bit far from work, but it's well connected, so I can easily go shopping downtown. The condo is just right for a single person like me, not too big, but spacious enough. Now, I'll have to work even harder to pay off my mortgage. But, after living there for about 6 months, I started to feel a bit lonely. I don't plan to remarry, and it's a bit too small for roommates. Just when I was pondering this, I found a stray kitten outside my apartment. I decided to watch it for a while, thinking its mother might show up. I thought the mother cat might show up and take the kitten away at some point, but the next day, the kitten was still in the same spot outside my apartment building, crying just like the day before. With winter approaching, I couldn't bear the thought of it freezing outside, so after consulting with my building manager, I decided to adopt it. The building allows pets, and as long as I take care of it, there's no issue. This playful kitten runs to me as soon as I get home. She's not picky with food and often snuggles into my bed during cold mornings. I wasn't particularly fond of cats before, but now I can't imagine life without her. I even show off her pictures at work, and I'm always talking about how she's the cutest. They say my child is the cutest, and I find myself oddly agreeing with that. I have a few friends who also have cats, so it's reassuring to know I can ask them for advice. These days, I look forward to coming home to my waiting cat. I brought something for you. Here it is. I watched closely as Jason handed a cake box to my mother. Jason's forced smile made me feel a bit uneasy. I quietly took the cake box from him. After slightly opening the box and confirming its contents, I threw it into the trash. Hey! What do you think you're doing? Jason and my mother simultaneously looked at me and expressed their anger at what had happened in front of them. What I did? I asked my mother, amazed. Did you see what was inside the cake? My mother began to tremble at the unexpected question, as if she didn't think it was possible. I glared at Jason to confirm if my suspicions were correct. Jason looked frustrated and upset. Just as I thought. I clenched my fist, ready to get back at Jason for what he had done. My name's Jessica Smith. I'm 36 and I work as a caregiver. Work is busy every day, and by the time I get home at night after leaving early in the morning, I'm completely worn out. I knew the job would be physically demanding, but since getting married to Jason a year ago, we hardly see each other. Jason, on his end, works as a long-haul truck driver with irregular hours, adding to our difficulties in finding quality time together. Anyhow, we know we need to address our marital issues soon, but with both of us buried in our jobs, it's been hard to communicate. Our initial meeting was through a mutual friend. I've always been shy when it comes to love. After becoming a caregiver, I often declined invitations to social events after work. I wasn't the type to actively seek out a relationship, and after a long day at work, I just couldn't muster the energy to go out. Most of my peers were desperately looking for partners as they approached the marriageable age. Even if they were tired from work, they'd make the effort to find a romantic partner. While watching my friends passionately tackle their challenges, I, who had been nonchalantly avoiding relationships, suddenly started feeling the pressure after turning 30. Especially as everyone around me began getting married or having children. I can't go on like this. Even if I'm shy when it comes to love, I had always wanted to marry someday. So, I reached out to a friend who once invited me to a singles party, and she introduced me to a man of my age. That was my husband Jason. Jason was 2 years older than me. He was always calm and composed, so I could sense the maturity that came with his age. What I needed wasn't a fiery romance, but a stable, quiet marital life. I liked him right away. Our interests aligned, and things moved quickly. We started dating and tied the knot a year ago. We began our marital life living with my mother. Without a father, I felt bad about leaving my mother alone after getting married. I thought Jason might object to living with my mother, but he was surprisingly okay with it. Though it took some time, I was able to get married and now live together with my mother. Everything seemed to fall into place and I was at ease, but from there, unexpected developments awaited. Something I couldn't have predicted just after our marriage. Right after Jason and I got married, there was an incident at my workplace. Several employees quit in succession. The reasons people gave for quitting varied widely. Some left to get married, while others wanted a change in career. While they probably didn't consult each other and quit all at once, the end result was that those left behind had to take on twice the amount of work as before. So, I started coming home later than ever before, and our lives became even more out of sync. So, when I left work on time for the first time in a while and sat down at the dinner table with Jason and my mother, I noticed the atmosphere in the house was incredibly tense. "Hey, did you take care of that thing we talked about the other day?" "What thing?" "You forgot? I told you to open an account at M Bank." Right. I forgot, my apologies." "How could you? I told you countless times. It's really thoughtless of you to forget." My mother looked amazed at Jason, sighing heavily. There seemed to be some exchange between them that I wasn't aware of, but Jason had forgotten something my mother had asked him to do. "What do you mean by bank?" "Well, Jessica, you have an account with M Bank, right? We never know what the future holds, and I think it would be wise for Jason to have one too, but he just won't listen." "I'm really sorry, I truly just forgot." "Oh, really? Well, if that's the case, it's fine." Indeed, I have an account with M Bank. My mother deposits a small amount into that account every month, thinking of the unforeseen future. Probably, she plans to save for Jason as well. But Jason doesn't seem to get that she's trying to save for him, he just hears it as a demand to open an account. My mother has a bit of a bad habit. She speaks in a curt way, which can come off as cold. Because Jason doesn't get her real intentions, their conversations often miss the mark. That being said, I myself haven't been able to talk properly with my mother lately, so I've often had fights with her. "Come on, Jason is busy too. No need to be so hard on him. You always say things so carelessly, not understanding the gravity of what I'm trying to convey." Not only is her tone sharp, but my mother also gets emotional quickly. So at that time too, it seemed that she was angry because her daughter didn't appreciate her kindness. That night in our bedroom, Jason said to me, "Your mom always seems to be nagging me. She gives me these confusing commands. Every day, until you get home, she's like a broken record telling me to get insurance, invest my money, and all that jazz. I'm exhausted from work and I just can't deal with her anymore." My mom had a time in the past when she didn't have money, and she's just worried. Instead of saying that, please just listen to her a bit. Knowing my mother's concerns, I tried to pacify the complaining Jason. On the surface, Jason seems to get along with my mother, but deep down he seemed to resent her. I get where he's coming from. I understand how annoying it can be to have someone go on and on about something you're not interested in, and even more so, how tiring it is to be constantly told what to do. But my mother just wants to ensure that Jason and I won't face financial hardships in the future. "I can't stand it anymore. I'll deal with insurance and investments when I feel like it. As for the M Bank account, it's obvious she'll only use it for her deposits or investments. Nowadays, you can't have multiple accounts at the same bank. M Bank is the closest to our house and she just wants an account, it's as clear as day." Normally calm, Jason becomes very emotional about my mother. Being able to empathize with both my mother's feelings and Jason's frustrations, I simply nodded to Jason's story, letting out a sigh, wondering if there wasn't some way to resolve things. "It might be better if we lived separately. That way, we wouldn't have to deal with her constant nagging." "Hey!" Jason knows I don't want to leave my mother alone. Making such a spiteful remark seemed rather mean-spirited to me. "I'm just kidding. I'm gonna do whatever she asks. Whether it's an account or whatever, I should just set it up for her, right?" He finally commented in a resigned tone, lying down on the bed in a huff. I didn't have any more to add, feeling uneasy. I just closed my eyes and lay down like Jason. So, after living together, it had been almost a year since the three of us had started living together and our feelings had remained at odds with each other. I feared that our days of discomfort would just continue, but an unexpected incident occurred. "Cancer!" Yes, it's really frustrating to find out about this at my age. One day, when I returned home a bit earlier than usual, my mother nonchalantly told me she'd been diagnosed with cancer. Jason hadn't returned yet, and it seemed like a good time for her to break the news. "Oh no! Is it serious? How advanced is it? It doesn't seem too serious yet, but I'm gonna have surgery soon and will probably be hospitalized for a bit. Can you handle the housework? My mother, more concerned about whether I can do the housework than her own surgery, leaves me wondering if she's being kind or just interfering. Either way, her concern over something so trivial irritated me, somehow. Of course I can manage. How old do you think I am? What's with you? I'm really worried about you. You're crabby. I get it without you saying it every time. I can handle the housework, you just focus on getting better. I don't even know why I'm getting so worked up, but the fact that my mother has cancer seems to have hit me harder than I thought. I just can't be honest with my feeling, and I found myself frustrated again at not being able to offer my mother any comforting words. All right, I get it. Jason would listen without any fuss. My mother doesn't know what Jason really thinks about her behind her back. So, seeing Jason nod on the surface in agreement to her requests, which almost sound like orders, she probably believes that Jason is on her side. While she scolds Jason in a stern tone at times, she doesn't seem to be genuinely mad at him. In reality, Jason always begrudgingly listens to my mother, and he's never seriously paid attention to what she says. I want to tell that to her, but given my current standing, I can't say anything to my mother. Even though I'm truly on my mother's side, not Jason, all I could do was murmur it in my heart. Afterwards, my mother informed Jason that she has cancer and needs surgery. I don't know how Jason reacted, but seeing the peaceful look on my mother's face before she slept, I could tell she was comforted just the right amount. However, as expected, Jason seemed deeply disturbed upon hearing about my mother's illness. How bad is your mother's illness? I'm not sure. All she told me was that it wasn't that bad. Is that so? Jason didn't seem convinced at all and showed a cryptic reaction. With my heart in turmoil, I tried to calm down as I headed to bed. That was the end of our conversation for the day, and Jason and I went to sleep amidst the chilling silence. From that day, even more so than before, I continued living a life without crossing paths with Jason at all. It seems that my mother and Jason rarely see each other. In that case, when on earth does Jason come home? I usually go to bed before Jason returned and start my day either before he wakes up or after he has left. This is exactly what it feels like to live separately within the same house. I was starting to suspect Jason, having no idea what he was thinking. While I continued living a life without crossing paths with Jason, the day of my mother's surgery finally arrived. I wonder if Jason will come. My mother sighed in her hospital room before entering the operating room. Even though Jason won't come, I'm here. Jason. There's no need to prioritize a son-in-law over one's own daughter, especially at a time like this. Having such bitter thoughts, I wonder if I'm a narrow-minded daughter. I kept my surprise hidden and simply cheered my mother on as she headed to the operating room. You got this. The surgery ended roughly 6 hours later. During that time, Jason never showed up. Of course, I had informed him, and he should have known today was the day of my mother's surgery. I just had to assume he was busy with work. The surgery was successful, and the cancer cells in my mother were temporarily removed. She would need to stay hospitalized for a while, but I sincerely hoped she would fully recover. When my mother woke up from the anesthesia, she seemed distracted ever since she was briefed by the doctor. Of course, she was happy about the successful surgery, but she couldn't help but wonder when Jason would come to visit. Don't worry so much. He'll come eventually. Maybe Jason's fed up with me. Oh dear. My mother, who's emotionally volatile, upon realizing that Jason's taking forever to show up, can't help but doubt that she might be disliked. While her suspicions aren't entirely wrong, she still believes that Jason is on her side, so she probably feels betrayed. While comforting my agitated mother, I listened to her complaints throughout her hospital stay with a heavy heart. A week after the surgery, Jason finally came to visit. It just so happened that I was visiting after work, and I could see my mother's face light up when Jason arrived. Hey, how are you feeling? I thought you'd never come, Jason. My mother's tone made it sound like she had been waiting for a lover, which embarrassed me. I brought something for you. Here it is. I watched closely as Jason handed a cake box to my mother. Jason's forced smile made me feel a bit uneasy. I quietly took the cake box from him. After slightly opening the box and confirming its contents, I threw it into the trash. Hey! What do you think you're doing? Jason and my mother simultaneously looked at me and expressed their anger at what had happened in front of them. What I did? I asked my mother, amazed. Did you see what was inside the cake? My mother began to tremble at the unexpected question, as if she didn't think it was possible. I glared at Jason to confirm if my suspicions were correct. Jason looked frustrated and upset. Just as I thought. I clenched my fist, ready to get back at Jason for what he had done. What the hell, Jessica? Throwing away the gift I specifically bought. Jason immediately adopted an aggressive stance, as if to argue that what he'd done was right. What do you mean? You should know better than anyone else, shouldn't you? I wasn't about to let Jason have the last word. For a long time, Jason and I had been living past each other, and confronting him directly like this was somewhat intimidating. But I couldn't let my mother suffer because of Jason's malice. That was the one thing I absolutely needed to prevent. What are you talking about? Hey, try the cake. It's delicious. Jason retrieved the cake box from the trash and pulled out the contents. It looked like a standard cream cake. But I recognized instantly. The cake wasn't from a bakery. As evidence, the cream was unevenly spread, and the strawberries on top looked somewhat pale and damaged. Yet, my mother didn't seem to notice such details, and she gazed at the cake, asking, "Huh? Hold on, let me try it first." I swiftly grabbed the cake from between Jason and my mother, who were close to each other, and took a bite from the edge. I really didn't want to, but there was no other choice. This was the only way to prove Jason's wrongdoing. After taking a bite at the cake, I immediately sensed something was off. First, it was incredibly salty. So salty and bad that I felt like throwing up. There was also an overpowering smell of alcohol, far more than what would normally be in such a dessert. I spit the cake into a tissue that was in the hospital room. Seeing my reaction, I could tell my mother's expression stiffened. This is unbelievable. What's with this taste? Loads of salt and alcohol. Aren't these the very things a cancer patient shouldn't consume? Even for healthy individuals, consuming too much salt and alcohol is toxic. For cancer patients, it further increases the risk of the disease. The idea that he intentionally wanted to feed this to my mother was horrifying. As Jason didn't anticipate I'd taste the cake, I could see him go pale. You knew Mom's cancer treatment caused taste disturbances. So, you brought this. What's your aim? It's not uncommon for cancer patients to have taste disturbances from treatments. I remember my mother telling me recently, I can't taste the food. Given her surgery, it should improve. But if Jason was aware of my mother's taste issues, it's not surprising he thought of the alcoholic cake. My mother looked at Jason with sheer terror. She seemed to have finally realized that he wasn't on her side. And as for Jason, he finally abandoned the facade of goodwill, lifted the corner of his eye and spoke with a defiant expression. The goal? It's obvious. To hasten this old hag's disease and cash in on the insurance money. Jason let out a loud, almost hysterical laugh. He's insane. He bragged about doing it for the insurance money, and tried to harm my mother. To know he had such intentions and would brazenly admit to them was horrifying. A chill ran down my spine. Huh? Do you even realize what you were trying to do? That's a crime, you know. I know, and I don't care if I become a criminal. I just want to get rid of this old hag as soon as possible. It's clear that when Jason scornfully referred to my mother as an old hag and tried to make her eat the poisoned cake, the image of Jason inside my mother's mind completely crumbled. That's how much my mother had a look of despair on her face. You're always nagging me, telling me to do this and that, and you get mad when I don't obey. My life isn't just for you, old hag. Don't order me around. It makes me sick. Jason vents the pent-up frustrations he's felt up until now at my mother. My mother looked at Jason with shocked eyes. I just didn't want you to struggle with money, Jason. I don't care about that. I decide for myself. Don't interfere in my life every single time. Damn it, you ruined my plan. What are you gonna do, Jessica? Jason glared at me while stamping his foot angrily. I held my head up high, trying not to be cowed by his snake-like eyes. In the corner of my vision, I could see my mother's frail body, crushed by despair. Wait for me, Mom. I'll drive this guy away. Sorry to break it to you, but instead of getting insurance money, you're the one who's gonna have to pay alimony. Huh? What the hell are you talking about? Jason laughed scornfully. He still hasn't realized. There's no way I'd confront you like this without any ammunition. I took out a large envelope from my bag and scattered its contents at Jason's feet. Seeing the contents of the envelope, the color drained from Jason's face in an instant. Looks like he recognized them. That makes things easier. These were investigated by a private investigator. I suspected you might be cheating. To my surprise, so much evidence came out so quickly. How's it going with your mistress? What I had laid out in front of Jason were numerous evidences of his affair brought by the investigator. Most of the photos are of him with his mistress. I didn't really want to look directly at the photos, but seeing Jason in them, leering and intertwining his arm with that woman's, fueled my determination. How's it going? What the hell are you talking about? This is so unfair. Realizing he could no longer make excuses with such evidence presented to him, Jason didn't try to dodge the blame. Instead, he lashed out, trying to paint me as the villain. But to me, it just sounded like the whining of a loser. No matter how much Jason shouted, I wasn't scared at all. Unfair? Who's being unfair? Sneaking around cheating on me while pretending to be busy, and then trying to do something terrible to my mom? Unbelievable. I thought you were busy with work, but you were actually busy cheating, weren't you? I feel so stupid for feeling down because we were living separate lives. Reflecting on my life up until now, tears naturally welled up in my eyes. I got married later than everyone else around me, but I was so happy when I married Jason. It saddened me that Jason would speak ill of my mother and that we could no longer hold a conversation together. My pent-up sadness and frustration that I couldn't vent to anyone suddenly exploded. Yet, even seeing me like that, Jason just sneered at me. I don't care about that. I was planning to live happily with Emma after getting a ton of insurance money. But you ruined it, you damn woman. Ignoring my feelings entirely, Jason continued to spew insults. Emma must be the name of his mistress. Doing my best to suppress my trembling body, I tried to retort to Jason. But before I could, my mother spoke up. I've been listening, and Jason, you're unbelievable. Not only for what you tried to do to me, but how can you speak to Jessica like that? It's because of you and your daughter that I've never been happy in my married life. It's your fault. Jason wasn't the calm and cool guy I once thought he was anymore. Distorted with ugliness, his desire to get away from me and my mother was painfully clear. My mother seemed to have finally lost her patience with Jason's incessant ranting. Excuse me? Our fault? Do you have any idea how much we've considered you in our lives? I've been saving money for you every month. Jessica, even when she was super busy, has been juggling work and housework. And yet you trample on our efforts like this? It's unbelievable. I could see the fire in my mother's eyes. Startled by her intensity, Jason took a step back. Shut up! I never asked for any of that! Jason tried to fight back against my mother, but it seemed to have no effect on her. Shut up! Apologize to Jessica! And never come back home! Jessica can be happy without a jerk like you! Hearing my mother shout, Jason finally fled the scene. The evidence of his infidelity remained scattered on the floor. I looked at my mother's face. Breathing heavily, my mother embodied the very image of a noble mother protecting her precious daughter. "Mom, thank you. That guy's unbelievable. Jessica, find a better man. You deserve more happiness." I had thought my mother didn't care about me at all. But she stood up for me. She truly cared for me. Realizing that alone brought tears to my eyes, and I sobbed uncontrollably in her chest. She gently stroked my back. After that, on my way back from the hospital, I stopped by a lawyer's office and decided to proceed with the divorce process. When I got home, I immediately contacted Jason to let him know that I would be proceeding with the divorce process through a lawyer. Jason seemed to have talked to my lawyer. And just like that, our divorce was finalized smoothly. After that, Jason moved out. He's probably living with that so-called Emma. But I doubt they'll ever find true happiness. Through my lawyer, I intend to seek damages from Jason for trying to feed my mother a poisoned cake. Knowing Jason, who was hoping to rely on my mother's life insurance, he's probably tight on money now. Well, it's no longer my problem. Of course, I haven't given Jason the money that my mother had saved up for him. If nothing had happened, he wouldn't have had to worry about money. I hope he struggles. As for me, after my mother was discharged from the hospital, we started our life together. I moved to a workplace with shorter working hours so I could spend more time with my mother. I plan to enjoy life just with my mother for a while. I haven't yet given back to her. But now, I'm able to talk much more openly with my mother than before, and I'm truly happy now. Poor families from the bottom rung should leave. The meat will taste bad. At a fancy steakhouse, when my daughter Jessica ordered cheaper meat, a banker at the next table started to pick on her. Her name is Julie Robinson, and we've had run-ins with her before. At the height of my anger, I decided to make a significant decision. My name is Michelle Stevens. I'm turning 50 this year and am a part-time working housewife. Due to being born to a father who loved collecting paintings, our family home was adorned with many artworks. I believe my dad often talked about paintings even during dinner, mentioning things like, "The use of color in that painting is exceptional," or "The artist who drew that was struggling in life back then, and it reflects in the art." Given the environment I grew up in, it wouldn't have been surprising if I had become an artist, but sadly, I had no talent in drawing. In my report cards, I always scored a C in art, and even now, I don't get the appeal of abstract paintings. However, my dad never discouraged me and told me to do what you love, so I studied economics in college. I met my current husband in college, and we got married when I was 25. A year after our marriage, Jessica was born. This life event led me to quit my job back then and fully focus on raising her. Once Jessica started elementary school and didn't need constant care, I started my part-time job. While my husband had a good income, I wanted to set an example for her by working as well. Fortunately, Jessica grew up well and is now a 24-year-old hardworking professional. She seems to face various challenges at work but is leading a lively life. Jessica loves steak, and about once a month, she, my husband, and I visit a fancy steakhouse. I also love meat, so I always look forward to our steak outings. When I lost both my parents around 2 years ago, going out for steak somewhat lightened my sorrow. Today as well, I've made lunch plans with Jessica to go to a fancy steakhouse. It's a weekday afternoon, but Jessica happened to have the day off, and I didn't have work either. My husband couldn't join us because he's on an extended business trip. But that's all right. Once he's back, we'll plan another outing with the three of us. As lunchtime approached, Jessica and I headed to our favorite steakhouse, and immediately started browsing the menu upon being seated. This restaurant is top tier, so the beef is, of course, delicious. However, their pork and chicken are equally tasty. The pork and chicken are also cheaper compared to beef, so we end up ordering them often. This time too, Jessica said, "I'll have the pork ribs and the juicy chicken, please." Of course, we didn't just order that, we also got some beef and rice. Soon after, our orders started arriving, and Jessica and I eagerly began grilling. As we relished the meal, we finished the meat in no time. We thought of ordering some more. But then, from the table across the aisle, we heard a weird chuckling sound. Wondering what was going on, we turned to see a middle-aged, somewhat chubby woman giggling at us. "Excuse me, is there a problem?" I asked, only to have the woman laugh even more. "Well, it's just funny. You come to such a fancy steak place and order cheap pork and chicken." She had been observing what we were eating. It felt invasive and uncomfortable. What we chose to eat is our business. We happen to like pork and chicken. Though I found her very rude, I tried to ignore her and focused back on the menu. But the woman from the next table wouldn't stop bothering us. "Pork and chicken, isn't that just bland? When there's delicious beef available, I can't understand why anyone would be so obsessed with pork and chicken." Your meat is burning." I pointed to the ladies' table. "Huh? Oh no, it really is." Jessica quickly grabbed the tongs. On the grill, an expensive-looking piece of meat was charred black. Julie was making a face, probably thinking it was because she was bothering us. I totally believe this was Julie's fault, but after moving the meat to her plate, she glared at us sharply. "It's because of you too. The best meat in this place is ruined. This was the most expensive one. What are you gonna do about it?" "What can we do?" I thought. "How about ordering a new piece?" I suggested hesitantly, but that only made Julie angrier. "It was your fault that the meat got ruined. Why should I have to pay out of pocket and order again?" Julie's anger seemed to be escalating, and she finally said, "Get out of this restaurant." "Hey, this is a high-end steakhouse, right? The only thing to order here is the prime beef. Doesn't matter if they have pork or chicken on the menu. The right choice is beef. People nibbling on pork and chicken like they're poor should probably just leave." At her absurd reasoning, both Jessica and I were dumbfounded. Seeing our reactions, Julie continued to rant. "Only people like me, who can afford to dine here twice a week, should be using this place. After all, I work at Blue Bank. I'm an elite." "Blue Bank?" "Blue Bank, a major bank, is where I have an account." But something else caught my attention. I felt like I had seen Julie at Blue Bank before. "Poor people like you have no right to taste the meat of this restaurant. Come on, just leave." As I watched Julie continue to rant, I finally remembered where I had seen her. "Didn't you have a disagreement with me at a Blue Bank ATM recently?" She seemed to recognize me as well and pointed, saying, "Ah, that annoying woman." The story dates back about a month ago. I stopped by Blue Bank to withdraw some money from the ATM. For some reason, the ATM, which should have been functional, wasn't working. The screen was pitch black and it wasn't working. As I was wondering what the issue was, a bank employee with a name tag reading Julie approached. It was the same woman. "Hey, what did you do? Did you break the ATM?" Julie seemed to think I had broken the ATM and frowned at me. "No, I didn't break it. It wasn't working from the start. I think there might be some issue with it." I tried to explain, but Julie insisted that I had broken it. "Don't try to act like it wasn't your fault." Just then, the branch manager, Jim, arrived and asked what the problem was. When I explained the situation, Jim immediately apologized. "I'm sorry. That ATM is out of order. But it seems the notice sign fell off. It wasn't your fault, and we apologize for accusing you." "Julie, apologize!" Urged by Jim, Julie apologized, but she clearly looked displeased. Although her attitude was upsetting, I decided it wasn't worth making a fuss and left. I had almost forgotten about the incident with Julie, but here she was again. I briefly told Jessica about the previous incident, and she whispered, "I see." It was clear that, even if she didn't voice it, Jessica was taken aback by Julie's behavior. Seeing our reactions, Julie shouted, "Don't you dare look down on me, you poor people." By now, I could feel the stares of other customers. The staff was also looking over, unsure of how to intervene. Please, keep your voice down. You're disturbing the other customers and the restaurant. Everyone's watching. I tried to warn her. Julie, realizing she was drawing attention, muttered, "Oh, I'm sorry," and started eating again. However, when the attention shifted away, she audaciously sat at our table. She whispered, "Leave, you bottom-class poor family. The meat will taste bad. Until you leave, I'm gonna keep complaining in a low voice." What? I was getting frustrated. Julie was incredibly persistent. She seemed intent on bad-mouthing us until we left. "Mom, let's just leave. I've had enough to eat." Jessica seemed to be annoyed and quickly stood up. She probably wasn't full yet, but her desire to distance herself from Julie must have prevailed. Realizing that Julie was not the kind of person to have a conversation with, I decided to give up on eating at this restaurant. "I get it. We'll go somewhere else." Upon hearing that, Julie grinned at me. "Oh, finally got the hint? Gosh, poor people sure are slow to catch on." Why do we have to leave because of someone like her? I wasn't gonna let this slide. I pulled out my phone, ready to retaliate. "I'm about to call Jim, the branch manager, and cancel a deposit of $3 billion. If you apologize right now, I might reconsider." Hearing this, Julie's face turned to shock for a moment, then she chuckled. "What's this about a $3 billion deposit? There's no way someone content with pork and chicken could have that kind of money. Come up with a better lie." Julie clearly didn't believe me. Her lack of customer awareness was glaringly evident, and I sighed. "All right, I'll call the branch manager. I'll step outside the restaurant to do so, but don't say I didn't warn you." I took Jessica with me, settled the bill, and went outside. As I was about to make the call, Julie came out too. "This seems fun. I'll watch from here. You're probably not gonna call the branch manager, but some random guy, right? A setup? I can't wait to see who answers." Annoyed by her taunting, I made the call. I dialed the number for Blue Bank and asked for Jim. Jim quickly came on the line, and when I explained the situation, he immediately apologized. "I'm so sorry. Julie has been incredibly rude. I'll make sure she doesn't bother you again, Ms. Michelle. We'll consider disciplinary actions against her. Please reconsider canceling the deposit." No, I can't trust a bank with employees like that. Being treated as poor just for eating pork and chicken is just too much. Plus, she treated me as a suspect regarding an ATM incident without any proof. If you let Julie continue, I feel it could lead to a major financial issue in the future. I'd like to cancel before that happens." Jim was again heard apologizing, but then Julie snatched my phone and blurted out something unthinkable. "Who are you? Claiming to be the branch manager? Are you this poor woman's husband?" She genuinely believed she wasn't speaking with Jim. Sadly for her, she was indeed speaking to the real branch manager, Jim. After such disrespectful remarks, this wouldn't end well. From the other end, I heard Jim's angry voice shout, "Is that Julie speaking? I am Jim, the branch manager." Julie finally realized who she was talking to. Her face going pale. "Are you really the branch manager? I thought she was calling some random guy. I'm so sorry." Julie kept apologizing over and over again. However, it was too late to apologize no matter how she tried. From the phone, you could hear the loud voice of Jim, the branch manager, and Julie's face went pale as if she were ill. Jim's voice was hard to hear at times, but the words come and immediately came through. Yes. I'll pass the phone to Ms. Michelle now. I'm so sorry about that." She then handed me the smartphone, saying, "Here you go, it's your phone call," with a courteous gesture. "Thanks," I replied. I took the phone and spoke with Jim again. He wanted me to apologize properly, so we headed to Blue Bank. All the while, Julie looked distraught and couldn't focus. When we arrived, Jim greeted us. We were led to a meeting room, and Julie was told to apologize. Without resistance, Julie said, I am deeply sorry. She then sat down on a nearby chair, holding her head in despair. Man. I was enjoying some fancy steak, and I didn't expect this. I shouldn't have played hooky. Wait, you were playing hooky? I asked in surprise. Seeing my reaction, Julie looked taken aback. Well, not exactly playing hooky, I was just a bit tired. She tried hard to make an excuse, but it was too late. Jim, with an awkward expression, explained. It's quite embarrassing, but Julie called in sick today due to a high fever. However, we found out from a call earlier that she was at a fancy steakhouse. In other words, she lied about being sick. Come to think of it, it was a weekday afternoon. The bank was open for regular business hours. To use sickness as an excuse to eat fancy steak? After being rude to a client and skipping work? I really can't trust you anymore, I said in a sharp tone. Jim apologized again. And Julie kept apologizing, saying, I'm so sorry. However, she then added, but come on, a deposit of $3 billion? You can't blame me for being skeptical. Jim immediately pointed out. Didn't I inform you about Ms. Michelle a long time ago? And yet, you didn't remember. This was your mistake, so stop complaining. Yes, I'm very sorry. Julie's face showed regret as she apologized again. However, her demeanor didn't seem genuinely remorseful. It was evident she was merely apologizing because she was scolded. That half-hearted apology is enough. But a deposit of $300 million does seem unreal, doesn't it? Let me explain. Actually, my father had a passion for collecting paintings, but he passed away a few years ago. I kept his paintings as a keepsake for a while, but unfortunately, I couldn't appreciate their true value. I decided to sell them to someone who'd cherish them more, and when I did, my account ballooned to $300 million. Is that even possible? Julie was more shocked than convinced. I was equally surprised when I sold the paintings, wondering how they could fetch such a high price. I understood how she felt. I didn't want to give my father's treasured paintings to just anyone, so I had them professionally appraised and sold them for their rightful value. As a result, I ended up with an unbelievable sum. I sold the last painting about 3 months ago. I wondered about keeping such a massive amount idle, but between part-time jobs and house chores, I just left it in the blue bank. I've decided to close the account. I think my late father would advise against leaving so much money untouched. It's the money he left for me, so I don't want to keep it in an unreliable institution. Upon hearing this, Jessica nodded. I agree with my mom. Having someone like Julie involved with such a significant amount of money does naturally raise concerns. Hearing this, Jim looked resigned. Understood. We'll go ahead and cancel that for you. Later on, Julie will be dealt with strictly. Just when I thought everything was settled, Julie continued her pleas. Please wait a minute. What's gonna happen to me? Please don't punish me. You're not gonna fire me, are you? Stop causing a scene in front of the customer. Miss Michelle, I'm terribly sorry. Please don't mind Julie's behavior. Before I knew it, Jim stepped in, but Julie suddenly gripped my arm tightly. Please, I beg you. Convince the manager not to penalize me. If my pay gets cut or I get fired, I'll be in big trouble. Truth be told, I have debts. A bank worker with debts? And yet you're eating at fancy steakhouses? Maybe start with some budgeting? When I said this with a stern tone, Julie's face looked like she was about to cry. Don't be so cold. Once I started living luxuriously, I couldn't stop. Hey, why not share some of your $300 million with me? Just $100,000 would do. What an absurd request. Why should I give you any money? I don't want to give you even a penny. When I pushed back, Julie's face turned beet red and she snapped. Stingy rich folks, aren't you? Do you guys even work? Having $300 million and still working? How much do you love money? Rich folks like you taking away jobs from others is simply low class. Our employers consider Jessica and I as formal employees. You have no right to tell us to quit. I got my work ethic from my parents' upbringing. Because we were wealthy enough to collect high-end paintings, we were well off back home. However, my parents, fearing I would develop a skewed sense of money, always tried to maintain an ordinary lifestyle. My dad worked diligently, and my mom put her all into house chores and her part-time job. If my parents had been lazy just because they were rich, I might have never thought of working earnestly and might have ended up unemployed. Now, as an adult with a child, I've taken after my parents, and I've raised Jessica with the same values. I took on part-time jobs because I wanted Jessica to see a hard-working woman as a role model. Perhaps that's why Jessica never became lazy and grew up to be a responsible adult in society. Also, working helps you learn common sense in society, and it adds structure to your life. That's why, even if we have money, we believe in working. I don't want unsensible folks like you meddling in our affairs. When I firmly spoke my piece, Julie was at a loss for words. Jim also said with a stern face, I get it, you're not remorseful. I'm gonna discuss firing you with the higher-ups, so brace yourself. Upon hearing this, Julie snapped back to reality. I'm so sorry, Ms. Michelle. I've been so stressed out lately and ended up complaining without thinking. I don't need a penny, just please forgive me. Obviously, after this series of events, I didn't feel like forgiving her. We don't need your insincere apologies. Face the consequences and suffer for it. I won't forgive you either. It's absurd that after saying such horrible things, you don't genuinely feel remorse. Following my lead, when Jessica spoke, it seemed Julie finally grasped that she wasn't getting any sympathy. She slumped dejectedly, muttering apologies over and over, but nobody comforted her. Later, I heard from Jim that Julie was fired. She was already known for being frequently late and was often rude to her juniors, so she had multiple issues with her work ethic. With this incident on top, she was swiftly fired. I heard that the moment Julie was informed of her termination, she collapsed on the spot. Reluctantly, an ambulance was called, and at the hospital, they discovered she had diabetes. Seems she didn't consider her age and indulged in meats and sweets daily, which has now put her in a critical condition. Currently, I heard Julie is hospitalized, and the medical bills are piling up. Losing a job while in debt, and on top of that having health issues, her future's probably gonna be pretty tough. The way things turned out for her feels like a harsher punishment than I expected, so my resentment towards her has faded. Jessica seemed to feel the same way, saying, if she's suffering that much, let's let bygones be bygones. On my end, I decided to manage the 3 billion yen I had in Blue Bank, which I guess would be something like $30 million here. After discussing it with my husband, who just returned from a long business trip, and Jessica, we decided to keep only what we'd need for the future and donate the rest. I didn't want any unnecessary attention, so I donated anonymously. This way, we didn't get any weird looks from the public. The money we kept? We didn't leave it in Blue Bank, we put it in a different one. Our family tradition of going out for steak is still going strong. In fact, we all went out just yesterday. My husband was with us this time. We ordered not just beef but also pork and chicken. No one gave us any side glances, and we thoroughly enjoyed our meal. Both Jessica and my husband seemed pleased, and I personally had a blast enjoying the meat. I want to keep making these happy moments with my family. Of course, we're gonna keep an eye on our health too. It wasn't a major accident, was it? I'm going on a trip now. So, take care of things there. When I heard my dad was hospitalized, I was taken aback. I had hoped my mother-in-law would come with me. But she left for her trip anyway. A week passed, and my mind was filled with these events, leaving my husband and I bewildered. Then, with no knowledge of what transpired, my mother-in-law came back with great energy. To her I said, "Your husband's funeral is over." She clutched her head, lost and confused by my words. My name is Catherine Turn. I'm turning 30 this year. I live with my husband Bob and my dad. I lost my mom at a young age, so my dad raised me, his only daughter. When getting married, I didn't want to leave my father alone. Bob happily agreed to this sentiment. Thanks to that, he came to live at my family home as a son-in-law. This year marks our 5th wedding anniversary. Hey Bob, let's go out for drinks this weekend. Found a great place. Is that so? Well, just don't drink too much, okay? If you get too drunk, it'll be hard for you to get home. Watching them talk and laugh together, there are moments they seem just like a real father and son. While Bob is a bit introverted, he's kind and friendly to everyone. My dad seems to appreciate that, which makes me happy. However, not everyone is happy about their bond. Enter my mother-in-law, Mary Matson. She seemed displeased that her precious son was living at his wife's family home. I can understand her feelings to some extent, but it was Bob's decision. Honestly, I wish she'd accept it. From the start of our marriage, whenever she visited, she never missed a chance to throw shade my way. Bob has married into your family, but he's still my son in every way that matters. No matter how many years pass, this line is always her opener. Then she continues with, "And remember, Catherine, you're not a guest when you're at your husband's family home. Help out with the chores." Saying this, she'd have me do everything from cleaning to cooking. But honestly, I never felt like I was just a visitor there. I carried out my duties without complaints, which probably annoyed her since she ran out of things to criticize. However, when it came to cooking, I'd always check in on how she preferred things. "Mary, how's the seasoning for the stew?" Without a word, she'd start adjusting it. Yet, she never missed an opportunity to critique. "This is nothing like our family's recipe. How could you make me taste this? Start over," she'd say, clearly displeased, and would then try to discard what I made. I always got angry at this behavior, but I could never speak up. I was afraid that if I did, I wouldn't know what she'd say next. Yet, in moments like these, my father-in-law would intervene. "Catherine put a lot of effort into that. How would you feel if someone tossed out your hard work?" "Well, it's not seasoned right. And it's too salty. Not good for our health." No matter how much he defended me, she wouldn't listen. I never intended to make the food overly salty. In fact, I often aimed for a lighter taste, adding more seasoning little by little. But she'd always find something to complain about. Bob sometimes stood up for me, but this only aggravated Mary more. "You don't need to say that much, Mom. You're going overboard. Mind your own business." Bob always got silenced like that by his mother. Yet later, he'd apologize, saying, "Sorry for not speaking up." I'd always smile and reply to Bob, "It's all right." I always felt that she was just bitter, thinking I stole her son away. So I believed she was just making life hard for me out of spite. Once I started thinking that way, I decided not to let her words get to me. And the fact that Bob and my father-in-law would stand up for me became my encouragement. But even though I tried not to let it affect me, if I kept hearing the same things every time I went to their house, it would still break my spirit. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. Even now, whenever I visit their house, she never fails to make snide comments at me. I've become good at brushing off most of what she says, so now her only remarks are about my cooking. She'd hint with a smile, suggesting she's about to start with her sarcasm. "How do you even manage to season the food this way? Odd, isn't it? I cook just how you told me to." I'd retort, matching her tit for tat. After 5 years, I'm not the pushover I used to be. At the start of our marriage, I was more reserved and there were many things I wanted to say but didn't. But now, given my nature, I've been speaking up more. Not that it would make her back down, and her remarks towards me didn't cease. In fact, they became even worse. One day, she surprisingly praised my cooking. "Oh, it turned out quite decent today. But there's still room for improvement." I was puzzled by her comment, yet took it as rare praise. That's when Bob intervened. "Actually, it's always good." Seeing her reaction to his words, she was visibly upset. And then, as always, the snarky comments began. Don't get ahead of yourself just because I complimented you. I haven't changed anything. I made it how you said. I'm actually grateful for your advice. She gave a grimace and then spoke. Oh, scary. Young wives these days talk back a lot. And with that, she left the room. Lately, I've not only been talking back but also not feeling as affected by her words. But there was one topic that always got to me. The fact that we didn't have kids even after 5 years of marriage. Whenever she ran out of comebacks, she'd always bring that up. I've been wanting to see my grandchild, but it seems that's still far off. When will that be? I'd be at a loss for words against such comments. Indeed, not having children after 5 years does bring concerns. But I believe the more you rush things, the harder they get. So even though I try not to let it affect me, it still hurts when she brings it up. It was becoming a real source of stress for me. Then one day, she called me out of the blue. Mary, what's the urgency? I was puzzled by the sudden call. Then, the mother-in-law responded with a gleeful look on her face. Oh, didn't I tell you? I'm going on a trip with my friends. I've been planning this for a while. I'll be back in about a week. Please take care of the house. I was shocked, as I hadn't heard anything about a trip. But then I realized something and asked. It looks like you've packed only for yourself. Isn't your husband going? He's staying home. I'm going with my friends. Why would I bring him? So please take care of him. That's unexpected. Just as I was about to retort, my phone rang. However, I didn't recognize the number, so I initially ignored it, but the calls kept coming. Suspicious, I decided to answer. To my surprise, it was a police officer. Is this Mrs. Catherine Turn's phone? Yes, it is. Wondering why the police were calling, I answered the question. Then I was told a shocking truth. Apparently, my father had been in a serious car accident and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. I was even told he was unconscious. No way, my dad. Overwhelmed by shock, I crouched down right where I was. Before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. Seeing me like that, my mother-in-law spoke up. What happened all of a sudden? My dad's been in a car accident and was taken by ambulance. As I responded through my tears, she unexpectedly said, Oh, that's all? What do you mean, that's all? They said he's unconscious. Can't you come with me? I feel so alone right now. I begged desperately, but she frowned and replied, I can't do that. It's probably not a big deal anyway. Besides, I gotta go on a trip now. You handle your stuff on your own. Take care of everything, okay? I can't believe. I tried to plead again, but she grabbed her bags and left the house. I thought, what if something happens to my dad? What should I do now? Then my father-in-law gently put his hand on my shoulder and quietly said, Let's go to the hospital first. I'll be there with you. Seeing the kind smile on his face, I felt relieved. So, together with him, I headed to the hospital. Once we arrived and were guided to my father's room, tears once again welled up in my eyes. After a while, Bob also rushed to the hospital. Instead of the distraught me, my father-in-law explained the situation, even mentioning my mother-in-law's trip. Catherine, don't worry about anything now. Stay by your dad's side. I can manage things at home by myself. Don't stress out. Thank you so much. I managed to say, overwhelmed with gratitude. And so, I kept a sleepless vigil by my unresponsive father's side. A week went by, and after dinner, Bob and I quietly drank some tea. Our minds were full, trying to process the events of the past few days. Then, unaware of our state, my mother-in-law came home cheerfully. I'm back. Sorry for being so late. I planned to be home earlier, but there was a lot of traffic. She spoke gleefully, but Bob and I remained silent, looking down. Still, she continued. The spa trip was so fun. Oh, and I got souvenirs for both of you. My cheerful mother-in-law didn't notice our mood, and it seemed like she wouldn't stop talking anytime soon. Well, I went to the beach, and the ocean looked so beautiful from the room. But the sea itself was also beautiful. It was really nice. We should all go together next time. However, noticing something was off, she looked around with a puzzled expression. Speaking of which, where's my husband? The house was locked, so I thought he was here. Dad's not here. I have the keys. Bob finally responded to the mother-in-law's query, though he looked tense. Why do you have the house keys, Bob? The mother-in-law asked, appearing clueless. With a straight face, Bob replied. It's hard to explain here. Let's go home and talk. Saying this, Bob picked up the car keys and his mother-in-law's luggage and headed to the car. I nodded in agreement with Bob's words, followed him without saying anything else. Unaware of our heavy mood, the mother-in-law was still in high spirits. And perhaps still in a holiday mood, she continued to chat happily in the car. The food was amazing since we were by the sea. Most of it was seafood, but the sashimi was particularly delicious. There were so many fresh fish, I wanted you guys to see it. She continued talking non-stop all the way to the house. A trip that took less than 30 minutes by car. But listening to her in silence was tough. But I couldn't stop the mother-in-law who was talking so joyfully. No, that's not it. I just didn't have the energy. Then, equally silent till now, an annoyed Bob finally spoke up. Mom, can you keep it down a bit? I'm trying to drive here. Hearing Bob's words, she pouted like a child and began to talk back. What? I'm just trying to keep the mood light since you're driving in the dark. Catherine isn't saying anything either. What's wrong with enjoying a drive? Hearing her response, I was left speechless out of exasperation. Bob, probably feeling the same way, let out a deep sigh. However, unable to bear it any longer, he shouted. Mom, just be quiet. I don't want to hear your stories right now. The mother-in-law looked genuinely shocked at Bob's tone. And then, with a puzzled look on her face, she began to speak. Why are you so angry? Just trying to concentrate on driving. Please, just be quiet for now. Perhaps understanding, the mother-in-law finally fell silent. We then spent the rest of the trip in silence. A few minutes later, we finally arrived at the family home. And as Bob unlocked the front door, he entered the house. I'm home. It feels good to be back. There's no place like home. The mother-in-law said, relieved, as soon as she entered the house. But when the lights turned on, she noticed something was amiss. She quietly began to speak. Wait, where is he? He wasn't at your place either. Saying this, she called out for her husband multiple times. But there was no response, and the mother-in-law came up with an optimistic theory. He's probably mad because I went on the trip without consulting him. He must have gone on a solo trip out of anger. That's why you guys couldn't tell me, right? I was growing tired of her cheerful assumptions. And I wondered how she could come up with such ideas. At that point, an exasperated Bob responded. Dad went on a long trip by himself. See? When's he coming back? She asked Bob without a hint of doubt in her voice. I couldn't stay silent any longer and tried to steady myself before speaking. He's not coming back. What do you mean? Is he that mad? Realizing she still didn't grasp the situation, I led her to a specific room. As she entered, she stood in shock and disbelief. Is this some kind of joke? It's not a joke. We've already held Dad's funeral. The mother-in-law, now grasping the gravity of the situation, asked what had happened. He was in a car accident. I replied, tears forming in my eyes. At Bob's words, my mother-in-law began to recall and speak. There was that car accident. Remember? Catherine's dad was rushed to the hospital. And on that day, wasn't your father here too? After that, my dad woke up. He's still hospitalized, though. Hearing my words, my mother-in-law seemed lost and held her head, saying she didn't understand. I then explained what happened afterward. On the day my dad was taken to the hospital, my father-in-law accompanied him. I was by my unconscious father's side, taking care of him all the time. Concerned about my father and me, my father-in-law visited us daily. And a few days later, when my dad finally woke up, both my father-in-law and I were overjoyed. We had plans to go out for drinks once he was discharged. But then, on our way back, I tried to speak calmly, but I was overwhelmed with emotion and couldn't continue. Bob took over for me. Dad was apparently taken to the same hospital as Catherine's father. Catherine saw him being brought in by ambulance by chance and let me know. I rushed there immediately, but it was already too late.
Why did that happen?
My mother-in-law, taken aback by our story, seemed lost for words. However, a visibly distressed Bob quickly changed his demeanor and spoke up.
What were you doing all that time, Mom? I tried contacting you multiple times. I had no idea things had gotten this bad.
My mother-in-law looked baffled by Bob's questioning. Seeing her like this, Bob's expression remained unchanged. We get it. No one expected this to happen.
That's right, isn't it? We're all in the same boat, right?
But as my mother-in-law tried to reason, Bob stared her down.
Then tell me, why was your cell phone off?
What? I mean. Hearing Bob's words, the mother-in-law turned pale. Yet, undeterred by her reaction, Bob continued speaking.
I kept calling, but your phone was always off. And when I finally thought I got through, no answer. You didn't even call back. What's that about?
My mother-in-law was at a loss for words. And she stayed silent. But Bob wasn't finished.
Why didn't you tell us you were going on a trip in advance? Who were you planning to go with? At least tell us where you're headed. Sure, you're an adult and don't need to tell us everything, but we would have liked to know, especially given what happened.
Bob shared our feelings on the matter. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law responded. I went on a trip with a friend.
But as far as I know, I contacted all your friends. None of them were with you. They even said they didn't know where you went.
Bob kept pressing for answers. I've made new friends recently. Ones you don't know about. She seemed determined to counter Bob's accusations. But Bob wasn't backing down. Is this him? Bob asked, showing her a photo of a man walking arm in arm with my mother-in-law. Seeing the picture, her face went pale. He's just a drinking buddy. Not the one I traveled with. Bob replied with a meaningful tone. Seems like you're quite close for just a drinking buddy. There's nothing between us. Sure, we're close, but not in the way you're implying.
Why the act? You think we don't know? Even my dad knew.
Unable to hold back his frustration with his evasive mother, Bob finally raised his voice.
Do you still deny anything with him, even after seeing this?
Bob thrust another photo at her, showing the two of them entering a hotel. The sight made her shiver. Why do you have this? It seemed that my mother-in-law realized she couldn't deny it any longer and timidly asked.
I found a diary when I was going through Dad's belongings. It was inside.
Bob calmly began to explain. He told her about the diary and how it mentioned the person in the photograph. His dad had known for quite some time that his wife had been having an affair but never confronted her. In fact, the diary even mentioned that he felt he was the one to blame.
Dad's diary didn't blame you or say a single bad thing about you.
Bob said. I'm so sorry. I did go on a trip with him. I never thought it would lead to this. I'm truly sorry. She apologized with tears in her eyes after understanding the gravity of her actions. I'm sorry to both of you. Please forgive me. I won't ever see him again and I'll change my ways. The mother-in-law pleaded while crying. However, Bob replied firmly.
Even if Dad forgave you, I will never.
Hearing this, the mother-in-law collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Yet, we left her there and exited the house. Later, Bob told us about a local bar that was mentioned in his father's diary. He went there and discreetly asked around. Apparently, the mother-in-law hadn't been meeting with the man she traveled with. They had both been hiding the fact that they were married and decided to part ways without any arguments. However, neighbors and friends found out about her affair and the fact she skipped her husband's funeral for a romantic getaway. They shunned her, and this hurt led her to sell her house and move away. On my end, I still struggled to cope with my father-in-law's passing. But my spirits were lifted when my dad got discharged from the hospital. We reminisce about my father-in-law almost daily.
I'm gonna go out for a drink soon. I had promised Bob's dad we'd have a drink together after he got better, so I'll bring his photo along.
My dad said cheerfully. Please ensure you're fully healed before you go out. We don't want you sleeping just anywhere. Bob responded with concern.
Nah, I'm fine. I'm not gonna sleep just anywhere with Bob's dad's photo.
He chuckled, not taking my plea seriously. Yet, he looked genuinely happy. To be honest, I hadn't found much to smile about since my father-in-law passed away. But lately, I've found myself laughing a bit more. Probably due to these light-hearted conversations. There's another piece of joyous news too. I'm pregnant. And as I want my father-in-law to rest in peace, I aim to regain my happiness bit by bit. I can't remain sad forever, especially now that I have a child on the way. I'm not exactly pretty-faced, and to be blunt, I'm overweight. Yet, despite this, a man married me, a man I genuinely loved. Now that I'm pregnant, he told me. I hate poor people like you. I'm gonna divorce you, a fat and ugly woman like you. Raise the child in your belly on your own. I can't believe he said such hurtful things to me. I wonder how he could say that to me. My name is Catherine. Growing up, I was never the center of attention, always in the quieter groups. To be honest, I've always been on the heavier side, and I'm well aware I don't have a traditionally cute face. So, I never really had admirers. But, surprisingly, I was quite athletic in school and was one of the top performers during PE. The female gym teacher would often compliment me, saying,
Catherine, you're so flexible and healthy. Your skin even glows more than anyone else's.
I suppose being top-notch in PE was the only area where I could shine. And having a gym teacher notice that made me incredibly happy. After high school, I chose to attend a beauty and health vocational school. I genuinely enjoyed learning about makeup techniques, body mechanics, and how to maintain good posture. I was among the top students. And I felt this was my calling. Eventually, I found a job at a spa that offered massages. It wasn't a big company, and the pay wasn't great. But I felt a sense of purpose, and many clients requested me. The spa wasn't exclusively for women, men could also get oil massages and relaxation massages. One of the male clients was Bob. Bob once said, after one of my massages,
You're really good. I don't think I can get a massage from anyone but you.
He praised me a lot. He even advised,
Why not spread your skills more? You're that good.
It felt great to be complimented on something I'm confident in, so I naturally developed feelings for him. I mean, anyone can do what I do. But yeah, I trained all the staff here. I replied modestly, but deep down, I was falling for Bob. Perhaps he sensed my feelings. Because he eventually asked me out. Bob knew many trendy places, and he was fun to talk to. Being with him always lifted my spirits, and I started thinking of marriage. And maybe he sensed that too. Because he proposed, and we got married. It felt like the peak of my life. I mean, I never stood out in school, wasn't particularly pretty, and was overweight. Because of that, I never experienced being popular or sought after. Yet, I was able to marry such a wonderful man. We rented a small apartment and began our life as a married couple. I imagined a future filled with endless smiles and happiness. I would even daydream to that extent. But those hopes were too idealistic. The times of such joyful smiles didn't last very long. My sister became the source of trouble in our marriage. Yes, I have an older sister named Rachel. Rachel was the opposite of me, pretty and with a great figure. She was always popular with the boys in school, and she's dated so many that I doubt she can even keep track. But to be honest, I never really liked Rachel. She always looked down on me because of our contrasting appearances.
Catherine, look at this dress. Isn't it cute? You should try wearing something like this. Oh, but I doubt it'd fit you. The dress would probably feel so sorry.
She teased, laughing. Another time, she said, "Oh my, someone confessed their feelings to me again, even though I told them I have a boyfriend. I must be super attractive." Catherine, you're lucky, you probably don't have such problems, right? She would often make these annoying remarks. But I couldn't retort because Rachel wasn't wrong. I'd always hoped to avoid her as much as possible since she was always like this. But suddenly, Rachel started visiting the apartment where Bob and I lived. It was right around the time when I found out I was pregnant. Unexpectedly, Rachel said with sincerity,
"Catherine, you're pregnant? Congratulations."
Hearing that, I was a bit shocked. Maybe her perspective changed since I got married. My feelings of surprise turned to joy. However, I felt a bit off shortly after. After looking around our place, she asked, "Is Bob not home today?" I thoughtlessly told her he was at work, but she kept talking about him. "So, what's Bob like? Does he get weekends off? Where do you guys usually go for dates?" I was bombarded with questions. I felt she spent more time talking about that than my pregnancy. It started to bring back all the negative feelings I had about her, but she just asked her questions and then left. The short interaction left me feeling drained. But after that, almost every weekend, Rachel started coming over. Bob was home on weekends, and initially, Rachel was all smiles and greeted him.
"Bob, you're gonna be a dad soon. Congratulations."
But, as her visits became frequent, she began to focus her attention solely on Bob, barely acknowledging me. Moreover, she started showing up in stylish clothes she usually wouldn't wear. I've never been much of a catch, but after all, I'm still a woman. I could see through Rachel's intentions. She was definitely coming to see Bob. It was evident from the way her voice and expressions became more feminine around him. Despite my growing discomfort, the bond between them seemed to be strengthening. I had always believed that Bob wouldn't fall for someone like Rachel, especially now that he's my husband. But as time passed, I began to feel an unsettling atmosphere, like my trust in him was being eroded. While Rachel and Bob's relationship appeared to grow closer, Bob's attitude towards me seemed to be cooling. Usually, when he'd come home from work, he'd say with a bright voice,
"I'm home. I've had a long day and can't wait to eat your cooking."
And during dinner, he'd praise,
"This is so delicious. I'm so lucky to eat your cooking every day."
However, a few weeks after Rachel started visiting, those kind words vanished. Instead of his usual demeanor, when Bob came home from work, he'd sigh and grumble. "Man, today was exhausting. Why on earth does the boss talk so darn long?" And during dinner, he started to complain. "I really wanted to eat some meat today. This isn't filling at all." I felt increasingly lonely and finally confronted Bob. "Hey, have you been irritated lately? Why does every day seem so miserable to you?" To my surprise, Bob shot me an angry glare. Something I hadn't seen even when we were dating.
"What? I don't want to hear that from you. You don't understand anything. After all, you just work some slow-paced job and earn peanuts."
His words felt harsh, almost like verbal abuse. I was deeply hurt, on the verge of tears. I never wanted to fight, but I couldn't stay silent either. "I don't work slowly, and my salary isn't that low." Before I could say more, Bob cut me off.
"That's enough. I'm gonna take a bath and then hit the hay."
And with that, he headed straight to the bathroom. From then on, Bob often came home late and was constantly on his phone when he was home. I had a growing sense of unease, especially since I was nearly 7 months pregnant. I didn't want to think negatively, but there were things I couldn't help but wonder about. One day, I gently prodded. "Rachel hasn't been around lately, has she?" Indeed. Rachel, who used to visit almost weekly, had suddenly stopped coming. However, Bob nonchalantly replied, "Who knows? Rachel lives in the next town over. If we wanted to see her, we could any time." This response alarmed me. I had never mentioned that Rachel lived in the neighboring town. Moreover, Rachel had just moved there barely a month ago. By that time, she had already stopped coming to our apartment. Unable to contain my suspicions any longer, I blurted out,
How do you know Rachel lives in the next town? Are you hiding something with her? It sure seems like it.
I finally blurted it out clearly. It was clear how much Bob meant to me, which is why I expressed myself so emotionally. I expressed my feelings so strongly just because I wanted to convey how I felt. But Bob seemed indifferent. Instead, he smirked and said, all right, I get it. If you're gonna be this way, we should just break up. Honestly, I'm not into women who've put on weight like you. And with your low earnings, life ain't fun. I don't like being poor. Divorce might be our only option." I was overwhelmed with shock, anger, and sadness. Especially with our baby on the way.
That's so cruel. What about our child?
In rapid succession, he retorted.
Raise the kid by yourself. I'm not gonna be that child's father anymore. Look, I like beautiful women with great figures like Rachel. I've decided to marry Rachel once I divorce you. So, you're useless to me now. I married you because you were good at massages and seemed like you'd handle the housework, but I'm over it.
He was just going off. I couldn't even get a word in. But being told such blunt truths made me change my feelings instantly. There's no point being with this man anymore. Actually, I realized I didn't want to be. Surely, Bob and Rachel had something going on. With my feelings completely cooled, I told him, all right, let's break up then. Take care. Then, I handed him the business card of the divorce attorney I had prepared, foreseeing this situation.
Wow, you're quick. I can divorce you right away with this. Once it's finalized, I might just head over to Rachel's place. You can keep living your broke life.
Bob was all excited as he took the business card, but if he truly planned on marrying Rachel, that excitement would probably fade pretty quickly, wouldn't it? But he didn't seem to realize that yet. So, I immediately started preparing to move out. I quickly secured a new place and decided to live there for a while. My belly was starting to show, and I was thinking of taking a break from work. About a month after I left our home, my phone rang one day. It was Bob. Even if I didn't answer, I knew what he wanted. Still, I picked up to settle things. His voice was frantic.
Hey, where are you? Do something, come on.
I calmly responded. I'm in one of the new luxury condos. It's spacious, has a great view, it's perfect. There was a pause from Bob.
What? How can someone broke like you afford such a place?
He'd probably think that way, wouldn't he? After all, he just assumed I was broke without knowing the whole story. But to be clear. Why? Because I have around $700,000 in savings. And my monthly income is around $50,000. He probably wouldn't believe it, but it was true. What I mean is, sure, the income from treatments at that workplace alone might not have been that much. However, the truth is, I was actually allowed to have a side job within that workplace. I taught remote massage classes online. At the workplace, I became an instructor, teaching beauty and health courses, including massage techniques. Initially, the spa owner appreciated my skills and knowledge, suggesting I try it. The staff at the same workplace also acknowledged that they improved faster thanks to my teachings. However, in the beginning, there wasn't much in terms of results. It was probably like that when I first started dating Bob too. Things changed, and now I have about 2,000 students nationwide. With a $50 membership fee, I made $100,000 monthly. I got half of it, so my share was really $50,000. When I told Bob this, he shouted,
"Why didn't you tell me sooner? We wouldn't have divorced. And we could have lived in a better house."
Too little, too late. He had always seen me as just a housemaid good for chores and massages. He'd always assumed I didn't earn much. Regarding the house choice with Bob, I told him, "I was matching your income level. After all, we agreed to split living expenses. So, if you're calling that a poor lifestyle, doesn't that mean your income isn't that great to begin with?" I made sure to say it plainly. And, to twist the knife further, I added sarcastically, "But, are you happy now that you married Rachel? I heard, you two really did get hitched. Congratulations." The reason this stings is because he must be facing hefty financial demands.
What the hell? I'm not happy at all. And what's this alimony about?
Indeed, I had consulted with a private investigator about Bob even before our divorce. So, after our divorce, I received evidence of him cheating with Rachel. So, I tried claiming compensation for emotional distress. But the tragedy doesn't end there for Bob. Turns out, Rachel had a significant debt, and she was making Bob pay for it. Rachel always attracted a lot of attention, and she was notorious for her affairs. Furthermore, Rachel had previously been through a divorce. The reason for their separation was Rachel's infidelity. Consequently, she had been charged with child support and property division due to that divorce. To cover these payments, Rachel had already accumulated a significant amount of debt. I was, of course, aware of this. Now, the situation is a reflection of Bob's decision to marry such a woman. Moreover, I'll also be claiming child support for the baby I'm carrying. So, with our divorce, Bob now faces a slew of hefty payments and has started a life burdened with debt. When I explained all this, Bob exclaimed,
"Hey, the baby in your belly is mine, right? A child needs a father. Right, Catherine?"
But who was the one who cruelly called me ugly and fat? Now, it's too late for such remarks, and there's no way I'm going to accommodate him. If you need money, why not spread your skills to everyone? You told me, remember? That everyone would benefit from Catherine's expertise. I took that advice and look where I am now. You should do the same. I suggested. It's pretty ironic, really. Because even though he was the one who suggested it, I was the one who acted on his advice, earning a high income. He neglected to notice my growing income and rashly labeled me as poor and then discarded me. Now, he's the one leading a life of poverty. Nowadays, Rachel keeps telling him,
"What's wrong with you? I thought you were a capable man, but you're nothing but common folk. Work harder and earn more money. You're just a man to repay my debts."
Come to think of it, when Rachel asked about Bob in the past, I thought it would be best to speak slightly favorably of him, so maybe I embellished the truth a bit. But all things considered, since both have similar life stories and ended up together, maybe they should just figure things out together. That's what I conveyed before ending the call. Nowadays, Bob is working day and night, juggling his main job and side jobs, trying to repay the massive debt he's incurred. All while Rachel, his wife, doesn't seem to be working earnestly at all. It's a living nightmare. Well, can't be helped. Bob not only abandoned me, but also the child in my womb. It's only fitting as a punishment. On the other hand, a couple of months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. While he's been dealt the card of not having a father, my parents and my workplace's owner have been supportive, and the child is growing up well. The initial months of raising a child meant I couldn't engage in any work-related activities, but fortunately, I had savings. Unexpectedly, even after my temporary retirement, my archived instructional videos kept generating steady income. Thanks to that, my child and I are leading a comfortable life.